Welcome to this ordinary meeting of Nelson City Council on Tuesday the 24th of November. I'll ask that you all stand for the opening prayer.
Almighty God, sovereign in all things, bless this city and its people. Guide us in local government each day that our decisions may be wise and just to magnify your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councillor Davey. Now, today we have the report back session from external organisations. I have apologies this morning from Councillor Fulton, Councillor Rainey, and Councillor Ward and Councillor Noonan for lateness. So the first two are for the full meeting and the second two are for lateness. So I'll move that we accept the apologies. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll put the apologies. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Now, confirmation of order of business. It'll be as set out on your agenda sheet. As we work through the list of external organisations, we'll just have to manage with who is here. So I'll just guide that from the chair. In terms of the interest register, if there's any particular interests that you need to note, I'll ask that you please do so as we get to the particular items, although there's no decision making today, so I don't know that that's going to be particularly relevant. Public forum, anyone for public forum? No one for public forum? All right, so in that case, no public forum. And there is no Mayor's report today. I will speak to the organisations that I belong to when we get through to them on the agenda. So first up, we have a presentation. Councillor Davey is here to report back on Te Hunanui Beach Holiday Park. Thank you, Councillor Davey. And Councillor Davey, you have some representatives here, Marcel, who's the General Manager, and I think somebody else who are going to give us a presentation. So I'll let you introduce.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Excuse me, Councillor Davey, I'll just take Councillor Barker.
I would just indicate that I'm an elected member of this board that's presented today, but as you indicated, there is no decision being made today.
No, I'm quite comfortable with you remaining.
I see no difficulty in saying.
Thank you. No, I see no difficulty either. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Davey.
Yes, my report back for the Te Hunanui Beach Holiday Park, I asked for permission to make a presentation on behalf of the Te Hunanui Beach Holiday Park by the manager, by the chairman of the board of the Te Hunanui Beach Holiday Park, Mr. Seddon Marshall, and in conjunction with Mr. Mark Hall, an architect who has been employed by the board to do a strategic plan and forecast for the motor camp. Three things that have been done in the past 2 years. We have removed all coal-fired boilers from the motor camp. We have undertaken a full review of the motor camp, and we have done something that I pushed for from day one of going on the board, and Mr. Marshall will acknowledge that the strategic plan is put together. And so I'd like to invite the three members of the board, or the three persons to do the presentation.
Good morning.
To come to the table and do the presentation on the strategic plan and direction of the Te Hunanui Beach Holiday Park.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Seddon, welcome. Good morning. And Seddon, I think it'll be, and welcome Marcel, and I'm presuming this is Mark. Mark, good morning. So I think it'll be helpful, Councillor Davey, if your representatives who are here just introduce themselves, because some of the councillors may not have met you, Marcel.
Yeah, most of you know me.
Seddon, if you can just, yes, and I'll just ask when you're presenting if you could press the button so the red light comes on, because then we can hear you and it goes on the recording. So the other thing I should tell you is we've gone to, is it live streaming? We're live streaming, so you're being live streamed across the nations of the world this morning.
So just very briefly, I was just going to say that when I first joined council in 1968, I became a council representative. The Te Hunanui Beach camp at that time had some major problems, and strangely enough I've stuck around ever since. It's 47 years, I think. Ian Barker, who came on as council rep, has done a great job for us. Paul Matheson has been there previously, and of course we now have Eric. We've had very, very good service from mayors and councillors over a long period of time. I'm not going to talk any more other than to get the others to introduce themselves, and then we'll go on with the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Seren. Good morning, Your Worship, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to present to you today. My name is Marcel Feckes. I've been the General Manager at the Holiday Park now for 11 months. I started on the 23rd of December last year. And I have been involved in tourism activities and hospitality industry for the last, 3 decades, I guess. Recently moved to Nelson region from the West Coast, from Franz Josef. I'm very pleased to be able to present this presentation to you today. We have seen huge opportunities at the Tahuna Beach Holiday Park. It's a jewel in the crown of the Nelson Council, and I think we have some really good plans that we can present to you today. We want to lift the actual holiday park to a resort status where it belongs. It's got a lot of international visitors as well as national, as you all know, and it's time to bring it into the 21st century and use all the amenities that it has available to us. So I've got Mark Hall here with me. Mark Hall is from MSH Architects. He has worked with me in the past. Great visionary, great plans, and he will present the actual concept master plan design for the revitalisation to you. Mark?
Yeah. Thanks, Marcel. What I'd like to do today, this morning, everyone, is just sort of take you through the scheme as it stands at the present, and focus on some of those things that we've found to be quite important in terms of what we're doing. We will leave you all with a document that explains this in a bit more detail, so we'll just look at the principal things very quickly for you. So this is just a bit of an introduction. It's about some of the findings that we've found and the processes that we're looking to implement. And this is really the concept design stage, which is the beginning of a series of probably 4 stages that we'll go to in terms of the design and development. One of them being the consultation process, which we believe is quite important to a project of this size. So with the board that we've been working with over the past few months, we've identified the vision and some of the objectives we need to go to. The principal one for the vision is actually creating an internationally high standard tourism and holiday camping destination that's suitable for both international as well as local New Zealanders. And then creating that along the style of the resort type of facility, which creates a lot of really exciting opportunities for people who stay there. And we'll look at that in a bit more detail as we proceed through. The objectives are that we want to implement a program going forward that will be staged over a period of time, that it is based on sound place-making structures, so that it is place-based rather than design-based, that it creates good spaces and camping and tourism opportunities, and that it integrates really good landscaping that is ecologically based and also locally based in its context. So those are some of the objectives that we're trying to create, and with the document you'll be able to read that in a bit more detail. So these are some of the images historically in putting the park in context. And on that top side here we see, early on in the park, about the 1960s, the development of that park from being something which is very simple in its structure. Some of the activities of how the park's been used as raceways, the growth of the park through the admin building, some of the good coastal facilities that it provides. And then down here, the park as it is today, and that photo taken in 2014. So this is the park sitting in this area. This is the estuary, and this is out into Tasman Bay. And you can see we've got quite a big site here. It's about 1 kilometre long, and at its peak we're getting up to 3,000 people attending this park. Now that is quite significant because that's getting close to the population of Hokitika. And it's actually bigger than the township of Franz Josef. So you can see that we've got quite a big community on this park of visitors and people who've been going here for about 40 plus years. And that kind of roll on for those people creating the community that arrives at the park each year, as well as new people. Very, very interesting and exciting place. So we've had a look at the park fabric, and here we see the park in greater context. So we've got the park sitting down through here. And then we see we've got Tahuna Beach up the top, we've got the estuary running through and along the edge of the park, which is quite significant. And then we've got the recreational reserve, which was another quite important part of this part of Tahuna and also for Nelson. And it's great because it creates some really good opportunities for us to create some linkages that the park doesn't quite have at the moment. And we are looking to, whatever we do in the park, to create a greater connectivity with our neighbours around us, which is this quite large residential area around the back here. And also these recreational activities that occur here, along with the zoo, the BMX park, and the sports field. So it's offering some really quite exciting things for us to tap into. And those images just to the side here just indicate some of the structures we've got. And you can see we've got a variety of building types, variety of facilities. We've got this fabulous little thing that occurs in the middle of the park, which is the relocatable village. And that sits in this zone here. And it's quite an interesting thing, actually, when you look at that in a bit more detail. We've got some great opportunities in terms of recreational park facilities that's existing, as well as playgrounds and those things of that nature. And then when you look at the facility as it is at the moment, she's a little bit tired in places, but she has a great fabric and structure to it, and we want to actually build on that. We want to retain the natural character that's there and build on those things that people find quite exciting when they come to Tahuna and spend the Christmas and summer holidays here. So, but it does actually identify some quite critical things for us, like this is the main entrance and arrival point. It's expansive, it's more parade ground than it is probably welcoming, and it's got quite extensive hard surfaces. We've got the opportunity for some lovely connections back into the neighbourhood that already exist, but are probably a little tired, a little run down. We've got buildings that offer some great facility, but they sit isolated in quite hard areas, and we want to integrate that a lot further. So then we've looked at what some of the opportunities are, and these are just some of the things that we've identified as being quite exciting. I mean, we have these fabulous views from our coastal edge. We've got these connections to the estuary. And recently, some of the work that's been done on the park has actually opened these up further, and they make a huge difference. And I invite you to go down and have a look at some of that. We get people doing this kind of thing, which is really great, taking chairs down to watch that western sunset. And those are the things we want to build on. We've got these wonderful opportunities of elevated sites along the water's edge. We've got the relocatable community where people have generated their own streetscapes, and we want to build on that. We've got these fabulous park facilities for all age groups. We've got the small kids park area, we've got mini golf, and there's the opportunity to grow that into something more exciting. So we've looked at what those strategies might be that we'll employ. So I've talked about placemaking. We want to reinforce the precincts. We want to generate some really great streetscapes happening here. Those streets already exist, but we need to reinforce them and improve them. We want to generate good public circulation, primarily on foot, so for pedestrians. We want to deal with some of the parking issues that we've got on that site. And we want to make people stay here experiential, exciting and memorable. And we want to do that with good future building development and also with the landscaping that we use. So we've looked at some very big moves on terms of the site and how we can generate that. And these simple diagrams start to put that in place. So the top one is looking at, we want to really generate this sense of arrival. That's our principal precinct. For when people arrive, they know where they're going to, and it's an exciting way to arrive. They're welcomed, and it's easy flow for them to register and then move to whether they're going camping in a park-like setting down on the western edge, or whether they're going into the little motel villas. And then we want to strengthen this linear access across the crest height of the park, and we want to generate the park walk. You know, there's some exciting things that exist there, and we want to link those so that people can actually enjoy that, and we can do some special things there. We then want to generate these precincts. We want to pick up on those and strengthen those, as well as the amenity buildings, which are these 6 items that feed through the park. And then we want to implement, going forward, a long-term landscaping plan. So we want to define this coastal edge and make that more exciting to engage in. That's the edge that the Great Tasman Cycleway will be following. We want to then, in this eastern edge, generate that where the motels are, the sense of arrival, and the playground areas are. We want to also focus on the sports field and generate the strong edge along the southern edge between the park and our neighbours. So that's creating something which is quite unique for that park. Then the idea is, as part of this process, is that we're not doing it alone, and that we want to work very closely with the board, our neighbours around the park, and the board stakeholders. So we've already started that process with the board, and I guess this first presentation is opening that up with the council. And then going forward, the idea of doing that further with the greater community. So this, in very simple terms, is the strategy plan that we're looking at doing. And just quickly, I'll walk you through that. So the idea is that this is our coastal edge, and so we want to reinforce that and introduce the Great Tasman Cycleway with the park, which will run along this edge. We want to create our driveway entrance off Beach Road and strengthen that, and then really create the sense of arrival at that main reception area. And in the very long term, in our 4th stage of this development, which we'll talk about shortly, is introduce some new building that ties closer with reception and arrival and with the conference centre, and integrating those which are a little bit isolated at the moment. We want to create this very strong recreational park at the main entrance. So that's when people are arriving, they come down this lovely edge of the coastal park, they come around this recreation zone, and then they see that things are occurring. So we've got the mini golf, there's the opportunity to create tennis courts, relocating some of the activities that sit along the back edge of the park, and really enforce that and make that into quite a feature. And then when they arrive, then they can see where they need to go, and then it's a simple process of following the structure through the park. We then want to create a stronger access around this southern circulation area. So we want to create that into a strong streetscape of avenue, and we're going to do that with quite specific landscaping. And then we want to take that landscaping and regenerate that in the residential component of the park. And then also back down where the caravan park is, we want to strengthen and soften that, because at the moment it's just very open, very tough in terms of when the caravans are there, and we want to soften that and make that more resort style. So it's about creating a resort style of living and experience. So it's generating all those qualities that resorts give for us in doing that. And then this long spine along the top is that walkway that we're creating. So as people arrive at this point and they're down in the residential, they can pick up on some of these great qualities. We're going to take people through that lovely little relocatable village. They can experience some of those gardens and pathways that those people have created. And then we're going to take them down through into that sports park, and we're really going to reinforce the activities of the amphitheatre that we've got, and also redefine some of those amenity buildings so that those become more of an integrated part of the park, rather than just things that are just standard ablution facilities. And then we want to make stronger connections out with our neighbours, and also out into the estuary and into the greater part of Tahuna Beach, and also the recreational reserve. We can't do that all in one hit, so we've looked at how we might do that, and we're sort of considering that in 4 principal stages, and that can be done over time, and that might be anywhere from 10 to 20 years. And as funding and opportunities arise for that to develop, it's a work in progress, and this is by no means the final design component that we'll be working to. And then this is just a finer reiteration of what some of those elements might be that we're needing to work with. So the top one is about the Tasman Cycleway, and then this is part of the landscaping structure. We've then focused on that principal arrival point, and what this is showing is what we might do in greater detail along this edge as we arrive from Beach Road, and as we enter into what effectively will be the stages 1 to 3, and the final stage will be the new build out along this edge. So here we're seeing that we've created this lovely recreational park. We've got some new build and existing heritage building here that we're retaining. We're going to create this lovely spine link through from the main reception arrival, through the recreational park, through to this central amenity building 1 at the moment, and then back into this lovely group of residential villa little buildings that exist now. We're going to strengthen that with some new build, and we're going to set that within a new landscaping structure. And the landscaping proposals for the park are going to be based on the context of the park and its locality. So we're looking at things like the coastal edge, the sand dunes, the forest, and the alpine structure. And so those things will be utilised that help define some of these precincts and some of these zones. And so in this, it's showing that amenity building 1, which sits on the top of a raised platform at the moment, will have its own landscaping facility around it. We're not losing any of the camping sites, those all retain, but we're just going to strengthen that and make that a more exciting and enjoyable space to be. We're going to put a big deck out the front that wraps around the sides of that, so people can enjoy those views back to the estuary, and also the morning and sunset, so they can enjoy that. So what we've done from there, we've looked at a little bit of structure, and that's just how we deal with some of the amenity buildings and what we might put there. So the idea is around each of these amenity buildings will have the kitchen garden that can be used by people in the park. We'll look at introducing eco wastewater management systems. We'll look at the barbecue areas, and we'll look at the opportunity to create fish and shellfish cleaning facilities for people who are engaging in fishing, and then also the recycling stations, and those are already moving forward as we talk now. We've got some ideas about those. So what I want to do now is visually walk you through the park that identifies some of these changes and these opportunities that we're trying to create. So on the left-hand side here, this is Beach Road, and this is the main route down that coastal edge that arrives in the park. The first thing we want to do is, with that existing landscaping we've got there at the moment, we want to reinforce that with some good signage so that it's easy to find when you're heading it down to find the park, because at the moment she's really difficult to get there. And then this is the main Beach Road extension. This is the park, start of the park on the left-hand side, and this is the estuary that we've got there at the moment. This is what the Great Tasman Cycleway could be like. We haven't got any information to hand on that at the moment, but this is saying that that element is a great way to set up the sense of arrival and get people primed for this great experience of living at the park. We've got an existing long fence and these lovely poplar trees. We want to reinforce that and strengthen it. So we'll do that with additional planting and with treatment in terms of colour and form to that fence. The idea of making the connections from that walkway out onto the estuary, with seating platforms, creates wonderful opportunities to engage in that at high and low tide. And at the moment, the park turns its back on that wonderful opportunity. And it gives us the opportunity also to work in partnership and collaboratively with other stakeholders like DOC and how we engage in that. And then this is the view of when we arrive into the park. So re-landscaping this, we've got the new sense of arrival of the new building. We're re-landscaping that recreational park, little club rooms there, and the idea of the seating platforms down this edge. We've got new streetscapes coming into the park. We want to do that with landscaping rather than other hard forms. So it's looking at utilising the landscaping down those edges and natural gravels to set in the streetscapes to prevent the jutta bars being as close as they are, and creating a difficult travel path through there. We then wish to look at looking at how we deal with fences and closing off some of those service spaces, creating the town walk coming up along the cabin areas and back through into some of those intersections with the relocatable village. Once again, we're using landscaping to define that rather than hard asphaltic paved surfaces. And then into the eastern edge of the little villas, we want to soften all that hard surfacing with landscaping, bringing new treescape design into that, still retaining the car parking. We're not losing any of that, but just making it more exciting and a sense of change. And then up on the little raised motel platform, we want to re-emphasise this space so that people engage in those wonderful views of the estuary. So we're going to landscape those areas so it's more usable. We want people out on those decks, and we can do that with seating platforms, with lawnscapes, and bringing that landscaping right up against the building itself. And then looking into the park and recreation area, these are some of the activities that we want to introduce into the park area. Lawn volleyball, lawn badminton, lawn tennis, into that recreational zone, the petanque areas set within the landscaping. This is actually a view of the existing mini golf, but it's been re-landscaped. This is part of the redesign of the children's play area. That bounce pillow is now in place. And this is the amphitheatre. We just want to re-sculpt that and re-landscape that and strengthen that facility that's already there and tie that into the park walk. And this is the view of the new sense of arrival, the new porte cochere grand canopy. As people come down the main street, they park, they know exactly where they go, they're up onto this new deck, the reception opens out onto them. This is that new axis that we've got that runs from the reception area and administration facilities back through the park to the residential, and coming back towards that view is where we link into the town, the park walk, and heading up past the conference centre, the village, and down into the sports park. And then this is looking at how we deal with the amenity buildings. Now, long term, these buildings will invariably be replaced and they will be subject to new design, but we need to retain those and utilise them as we move forward on an intermittent basis. So this is Administration Building 1, and we've put a colour to that as a way of dealing with that, and to lock in all those different materials, as some of these buildings have up to 4 or 5 construction materials to them. We want to set them in their own landscaping areas so that they are more identifiable. And this is getting down into amenity building 4, and you can see there's change in the landscape there and how that building's working. And then down into the park, there's a lovely building there that we want to reinforce more as pavilion and offering greater facilities to that. Once again, that sets itself in its own landscape and links to the park. And then this is the communal buildings that are sit between the cabins and the motel buildings. So once again, they get the landscaping treatment. We're softening all that hard paving. We're introducing landscape plantations so that we can grow our own landscaping plants and have an ongoing process with that. And then down into the park area pavilion building, which offers some great opportunities to generate that further. And then this is just some of the palette of materials and natural landscape materials that we can introduce. They can be locally sourced, and that shows you how we can utilise those materials and forms to kind of create something quite unique to the park and grow that further. And that's very quickly how this scheme is shaping up.
Thank you, Mark. Marcel, is there anything you wish to add to this? But I know there'll be some questions, and then Eric, if there's anything further you wish to add, please do so.
I guess this would give you a very good overview of the concept design for the revitalisation of the park, and it has been adopted by the board that we proceed with the plan. And it really works in really well with our 90th anniversary as well, which is next year. We have a campaign designed around that, but that was recently adopted by the board as well. It's going to be a nationwide campaign celebrating the 90th anniversary, but also a very big call, marketing call-wise, to entice New Zealand to come back to the park and enjoy it once again. So I've got a document on that for you to have a look at as well.
Right. Councillor Davey.
Just to finish off, I'd like to stress that the Tahuna Beach Holiday Park doesn't cost the council anything. All the capital projects have been paid within. We have borrowed money from the council and paying the interest and the loans back. The board foresees the ability to carry out most of the work within its own structures, but one day they might ask for a little bit of help. I would like to point out that the motor camp brings in over $20 million to the community every year, and it's a valuable piece of ground for the Nelson City Council, and it's the 90th anniversary, right. And that is in conjunction with the Nelson City settlers anniversary of 175 years next year. So together, 90 years for the Tahuna Beach Holiday Park, 175 years for Nelson. So I think that's time to celebrate. We should make the most of it. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, the board will be only too happy to answer.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation and the pictures, and I look forward to, can we get a copy of what Councillor Barker's got? Yeah. One of the things that I was thinking about while you were talking us through it is, it looks really impressive, but I'm just wondering, in practice, who's it going to be for? Because most of the year, as I understand it, the camp is largely empty. And I also understand that people going to holiday parks is becoming a less common thing for people to do. And you mentioned enticing people back to the park, which sort of suggests they've gone away. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, it's a big project, and most of the time the holiday park is pretty much empty.
Well, I'd have to disagree with that, unfortunately. The holiday park is well used, and obviously we have our peak time in the height of the season. That's when Cantabrians and Wellingtonians come to enjoy our Nelson sunshine. However, we do have a annual guest night of 160,000 nights, which is a lot of nights if you look at your average throughout the country. So it is very well used. However, it would look not so much used outside of the peak, because that's when we have 3,000 plus people per day in the park. So who's it for? Camping is definitely not out of vogue. It's definitely coming back into vogue. More and more people are actually camper vanning, coming into sites like ours because they would like to use the facilities that we offer. And we also are now marketing ourselves more as a motel because we have the facilities for that. We have a lot of roofed accommodation, 89 units in total. And we've kind of, I guess over the years, we've missed the mark there because we haven't been promoting that. But if you had the choice to going to a motel where you have a 2-metre balcony attached to it, which is your outdoor space, or you can come to a holiday park and actually enjoy the whole park whilst you're motelling there, you've got a big advantage. And we are very price competitive as well.
Thank you.
Supplementary question, if that's
Further
okay?
question,
If
Councillor
that's
Rowe?
okay. Yes, thanks. I'm just also interested in what appears from we had a visit to the park earlier in the year, and we were shown the semi-permanent community that's emerging there, and I wonder if that gets bigger, is that going to create conflict in time if the city ever decided they wanted to do something else with that valuable land?
We have a set amount of sites that are semi-permanent sites, and that's set in our lease arrangement. So there's a cap on that. It's the people that live there actually live there by choice. It's a lifestyle choice they make. They minimise. They come into the minimalistic way of living, and really enjoy that lifestyle. We have all sorts of walks of life living there. We've got pilots and midwives and all sorts of people there. I can't see us expanding on that because we need the space for our holiday makers, and I couldn't really see any better use of the land that's there as a reserve than what it is now. It's just a matter of lifting our game and making it into that resort status.
Could I?
Mark?
Yeah, just getting back to that previous question about, how is it used on the off season? What do you do with that? Well, I think when you go through this process, and which is about looking at what those opportunities might be, I think this is actually can actually achieve a lot of those off season events. I mean, we've got a lovely recreational park here that it can be open to the wider community. We've got that sports facility and the amphitheatre, and there was an image that was quickly shown there where there was an amphitheatre and an inflatable, like a drive-in movie facility. There's no reason why, in those wonderful wintry days of an evening, that couldn't happen. I mean, sports facilities, schools could come here, they can use those sport facilities, they can go out into the estuary and make those connections. That's where I think building that connectivity with the greater community, getting those ideas and bringing them on board, because the structure is already here. It's actually, what do we put the best use of it to? And that's the most exciting thing, is that this park can offer all those opportunities both, and remain as that wonderful, iconic tourist destination for campers and the families. I think as kind of the biggest Southern Hemisphere campground, I think, the opportunity to grow this is quite unique. So I think the events facility is really exciting. We need to look at how we can grow that and what those opportunities are and get them in the mix.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Now, I've got a list of questions, so all people that wish to ask questions. So Councillor Copeland, Councillor Ward, Councillor McGurk and Councillor Skinner.
Well, thank you very much. I thought it was a fantastic presentation, and I liked, you sold it very, very well and lovely languaging around the concept. I'm very happy to see it's based a lot on the landscaping, and those hard asphalt surfaces are kind of a thing of the past, really. But I was just curious as to your experience down there during the summer. I haven't had a heck of a lot, but a little bit, and we do get a lot of wind, and I'm just some of those images had decks with people lounging on them. So you won't lounge in the summer in Nelson anywhere for more than 5 minutes without a cover. So I was just curious as to your choice of Nikau's, because again we have a very dry, windy, it's not a damp environment down there in the summer, and we actually need a lot of shade as primarily, and shelter.
Look, I'd,
as good as they look, you know.
Yeah, look, I'd support that, you know, what you're saying. I mean, today, you know, yeah, it's very dry on that park. You know, the grass is, you know, having a really difficult time. I'm not saying that those trees and those planting are going to be used. I think that's where we need to work closely with others about how we do that. What we're saying is we need a tree that is going to suit that, and it's going to create those kind of shade devices and the avenue effects. I think you're right about the decks. We do need to provide shade there. Those can be retractable, they can be demountable. You know, that's a detail that we need to introduce going forward.
Sure, it'd just be great to have a couple of summers to gauge actually how it is down there, because the wind comes in crazy in the front there. It's almost hard to handle. I think this year's going to be another windy one too, isn't it?
Potentially, yes, correct. It's not windy all the time though. I've noticed last year that it was just pre-Christmas and then it died down. Yeah. So, you know, you deal with it as it comes, I guess.
As it comes along. And just one subsequent question was around coastal inundation. Have you obviously taken that into consideration with the longer term? This plans to roll out over the next, what is it, 10, 15 years?
That's right. Yeah.
Trajectory. Have you lined it up with any projection in terms of our inundation
I believe
issues?
there's a coastal study being done by council as we speak, or is about to commence. So we'd love to be part of that. Obviously, we want to protect our bit of paradise there so that we can keep using it.
And just one final question, is that forming, you didn't mention that in today's report, the retaining all these, any coastal remedial work that may or may not be required, is that part of this
The main
vision?
part that was required for the park, for the best protection, has been done already. However, there are further towards us, if you like, towards the reception part of the camp, there is still some required, which would also potentially help us create the cycle trail that we would like to see there. So it might work hand in hand.
Great. Oh, thank you.
See,
Thank you.
I think this is one of the great things about a strategy like this, is that it identifies all those things you were raising about, you know, has this been done, what if, what do we do? And it kind of brings that out for discussion and resolution based on something going forward.
Sure.
And so it gives a structure that those things can be, you know, prioritised around maybe.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Ward is next. Councillor Ward, would you mind using the microphone? Thank you.
My sense is that the general public are going to want to go there, and you're happy, you're comfortable with that? Because it seems like a new look, because that's most motor camps aren't like that. You know, you get the sense if you're not staying there, you shouldn't be there. This is one you're saying actually it's a change in focus. It's admirable.
It has, as I mentioned, we have 160,000 guest nights per annum, which means there's a lot of use of this park, and we see the numbers growing. Since I arrived, month on month, we've had increased visitor numbers. So there's definitely a trend of people wanting to use the park, and I think we can just increase that by upping our facilities and the way we present ourselves.
Thank you. Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got a couple of questions. Yeah, thanks very much for the presentation. It was very positive and a lot of emphasis on the opportunities that are there and some of the strengths you're playing to. So on the other side of the coin, I was probably looking at about a recognition of where your weaknesses might be and perhaps where your threats lie. So perhaps a recognition of the threats and where you see your weaknesses and perhaps how you've responded to that.
I guess one of the threats that is the coastal erosion. That's something we need to address and look at. So that would be one. Two, I believe that with our projection of growth, we need to make sure that we're big enough to be able to attend to everyone's needs.
Thank you.
Continue on. The Great Taste Trail that you're talking about, you know, the way you put it out there probably seems the most logical route, but it probably looks at the moment, unless you've got some kind of buy-in from neighbouring landowners further to the south, it might be the route to nowhere. So I'm just wondering if you've got some comment on that. How dependent is that route on they're planning on?
What I understand is that the owners of the golf course are very willing to have it around the golf course. With new management at the airport, there was talk with the new management, Rob Evans, to see how we might be able to utilise that around the airport as well, which means we'd have a fantastic link from the start point at the airport, and ideally it would go right around to Round of Rocks Road, keep it coastal, and make it the starting point at the eyesight here in town.
Any further questions? No, we're good. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you. Just 3 quick questions. Mark, when you mentioned about the objectives of place-based rather than design-based, what's that mean?
Well, what I mean about when we talk about place-based design, it's actually it's where the place itself, so we're talking about the site, the park, and its neighbours, drive the design itself. So we're not coming in with architecture and ideas going, this is how it's going to be, this is going to go here, this is going to do that, and this is where it's going to structure. We're putting that aside, and we're looking at how the place generates and drives the design.
Okay.
And a really strong component of that, which is quite a shift from it not just being beautification through a bit of landscaping and a bit of streetscape, is that the consultation process is critical to good placemaking, because we know some things as designers, but we don't know everything, and we need to engage with those people as part of our design team to help us understand those issues and drive those ideas.
And through the chair, the conference centre, function centre, how's that fit in? That's still going to be, or are you making any changes that works well? I'm familiar with it as far as the weddings and conferences and
Yep,
that up there.
correct.
That seems to work very well. But is there any area for improvement?
It's currently leased to a third party, so we have
Correct.
a subtenant there, and obviously they are to do the way they feel fit
Yep.
to run it. It is run as a wedding centre, functions in general. I believe we could do more. I think it could be utilised better. However, that's not in our hands at this stage.
No, very good. And any likelihood of motorsport back on the back beach?
I doubt it. We'll have to talk to Doc.
Good answer, myself.
last one. I quite like those Nicole Palms. I'm not sure if that's last there. The bouncy pillow, I'm there already. Milkshakes and pies, and I'm definitely there. At the dairy. You're not getting rid of the milkshakes and pies.
You're in luck. Oh, Seton?
My turn. We are currently building a lovely deck in the front of the facility, which will have coffee, cakes, buns, pies, all milkshakes, yes, even if you like milkshakes, anything you like, if you buy it, we'll sell it. It is currently under construction. It will be all fully operational by Christmas, and it will become a base for people who actually, as well as living in the camp, wish to visit. And we already have 2 children's playgrounds there. We have got the mini golf. We have put in the bouncy mattress, which is the first.
No age limit on the bouncy pillow?
Timing is the main thing.
Councillor Skinner.
We don't want great big fellows on the
actually,
little fellows.
Can you just tidy your act up a little bit? Because I have quite a meeting to get through.
I enjoyed the I got quite excited at that presentation there. I'm not sure
It is a big mattress. There's plenty of space.
I'll stop there while I'm ahead. But
Hey, there's plenty there.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner's got plenty of children to bring down and enjoy the facilities. Now, Deputy Mayor, final question and then we're wrapping up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nice to see you guys. What I thought was quite exciting was the boardwalk that you're planning across the estuary to connect the recreational area to the camp. Can you talk about that a bit more?
Yeah, sure. I think
you don't need resource consent. Just talk to Sid.
thank you, Paul.
that's the kind of support we need. Look, I think the thing about the boardwalks is, you know, that estuary is different at different times of the day, you know, and it's exciting. You know, there is, as I understand it, you know, a very rare snail that lives in that space. And I think to be able to get out, I mean, people already engage in that wetlands when the tide is out, And I was walking all the way through there, and there are people with their dogs and all of that. And there's great things with driftwood that comes in there. And I'm saying to myself, we need to harvest that and bring it in as part of the landscaping. But getting people out there when the tide's in, and experiencing that, and just sitting out there and admiring that sunset and that that gateway view between the headlands of the park and the headlands of Tahuna Beach is quite amazing. And at the moment, everything turns its back on it. And I think the boardwalks give us a controlled way of getting people out on the water. And it also gives us a very soft touch to what we do to that sensitive area. And I think when you open those things up to people, they take a greater responsibility for it and a greater care for it. I mean, the other thing is it gives us the opportunity to also make that boardwalk link directly across to the recreational park, which at the moment, you have to ask, why isn't it part of what we're doing? So whatever we do is in association to what they do, and what they do is in association with us, because there's going to be synchronicity between those two. At 3,000 people, that's a huge captive audience. And so I think by getting those, and they don't need to be extensive, they just create that kind of unique facility that this park will bring.
Thank you. Look, thank you all for coming in and presenting. Obviously it's going to be the start of a conversation. You've done some really interesting work here, and I know there's a lot of interest around the council table. So thank you very much. Councillor Davey, is there anything you want to finish with?
Yes, Madam. Thank you very much for your indulgence in the time you've allowed for this. That's my report back for my position on the Tahuna Beach Holiday Park Board. And I must state that this is the public release of the strategic plan to the community as a whole. It's the first time it has been released, and I think the community will embrace the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming in to see us. Thank you. Thank you. All right, councillors, now we do move on to the council representative reporting on external organisations. So we have attached, you'll have attached to your agenda on page 4, the list of organisations, and Councillor Ward, you're first up with the Arts Council, Nelson.
Look, I've been associated with the Arts Council, so I think since my second term on council, and it is one of the leading, it has always been one of the leading community arts councils in New Zealand, but I haven't seen it as successful as it is now for a long time. I think the fact that we have the refinery under our wing is a real plus. The engagement with the community in ways that weren't possible before are happening. We have a good manager in there who presents every month with a report on what's happening, the success of the place. The meeting rooms, out the back are getting better used for teaching spaces. They're being reasonably cautious. I think it will generate enough money to actually fund activities that can't fund themselves, and that's a real plus. Whenever anybody comes in with an idea, by and large we're saying, look, let's just see how we're going before we start being too generous. But at this stage, it's looking good. The other plus with the refinery is the engagement of individual arts councillors. Because by and large, when you have paid staff, the volunteers tend to leave it to paid staff. That isn't happening to the same extent here, and I've been delighted by the engagement of arts councillors and all sorts of things, in the underfloor insulation. We've got some skills on the council. And in the planning for it, and when I turn up to activities there, the councillors are there as well. So it's successful. Financially, yeah, we're not overspending. In fact, I think we're doing rather well. We've had to take on our administrator for longer hours, but we're managing that out of the money that's coming out of the refinery, and that's largely why we actually need additional administrative help. is there value in having me on there? Well, I think so. But I have an interest in the arts, and so there's my personal contacts and interests that comes to play. Do I keep the council in mind all the time? Yes, I do, because there are always opportunities for Arts Council to interact with the council staff, and the engagement with Chris Ward is excellent, I must say. You know, can't sing his praises too highly. So, ongoing engagement with councillor on there, yes, I would say it's a plus. I think you do need that.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Any questions for Councillor Ward? Councillor Laurie.
Rather than a question, can I just make a comment, if that's okay, because it relates entirely to Arts Council Nelson. As a former member of the Kahurangi Employment Trust, I was concerned about the future of the refinery building when the trust came to an end, and since Arts Council Nelson have, as I understand it, taken over the management of the building, I think it's being used, seems to be being used very well. And in fact, I think the arcade exhibition that's on there at the moment is fantastic, and I hear there's really big numbers of people going to it of all ages. It's a love letter to 1980s video game parlours, and according to my children, it was the opening was the greatest opening of an arts exhibition in the history of arts exhibitions, and it's getting really used really well. So head off to Arts Council Nelson from me.
Thank you. Positive feedback. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mike. I'm just wondering, as I always do, how much help are you getting from Tasman District Council?
It's much less. I can't recall the figure, but the Arts Council does try to engage with the Tasman District folk. You know, we really aren't two communities, particularly as far as the arts are concerned. And while we might like to think that the Tasman District might fund it more generously, that isn't the way it is, and we can't let that stop us from going on and meeting what we think are Arts Council's responsibilities to the broader community. But most of the things that happen actually benefit the folk in this town, probably more than the folk out in the Tasman District, because most of the arts activities happen in the city.
Thank you. Right, any further questions? No further questions. Thank you, Councillor Ward, for the report back on the Arts Council. Now, next on the list is the Broad Green Society, and that position actually remains vacant at the moment, so there is no report back for the Broad Green Society. If there is a councillor that was keen to fill that vacancy, then I'm happy to hear from you and have that discussion, but we are doing, we will work our way through that process, and I think the Broad Green Society is on really good footing at the moment. I'm moving forward into the summer season, and as a result of the council decisions that were made recently, things are going really well. Now, next on the list is the Cawthron Institute Trust Board, which I'm the appointed member. The Cawthron Trust Board has the role of administering some trust funds. We appoint the directors to the board of Cawthron, and we also select and host the Cawthron Lecture each year. This year the Cawthron Lecture will be presented by Professor Ian McCullman. Ian is a historian, and he will be presenting his lecture on Great Barrier Reef passions, so the history and connection to the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. He's apparently an excellent speaker, so we're looking forward to the lecture. It is always sold out and very popular in the series of what goes on in Nelson throughout the year. This year we have also launched the Cawthron Foundation. The Cawthron Foundation is an opportunity to support scholarships for research, for undergraduate research, connections with the Cawthron Institute, to support a ongoing research program, and the opportunity is there to either leave a gift to the foundation in your will, or to create an endowment fund or make a donation. We launched the foundation a few weeks ago, had a very positive response from the Nelson community, and it is going really well. But I would encourage you just to, and all Nelsonians, just to think about that opportunity to support the foundation. The link of philanthropic endeavour from Thomas Cawthron has influenced the city greatly, from the church steps to the Rocks Road chain fence to the Cawthron Institute itself. It's, if you think about the impact that one individual has had on the city, Thomas Cawthron absolutely stands out. I did have a discussion the other day with a local journalist who had been travelling overseas, and he suggested to me that one of the things that would be great is to have a Thomas Cawthron walk within Nelson, something that tells a bit of the history of the city, where you travel around and learn about this city through the gifts of Thomas Cawthron, and I think it's a fantastic idea, so I'm going to do a little bit more work on that to see what is possible. I think walking a city and walking tours are a fantastic way to experience places as a tourist, to get to know people and get to know places. So, and I think Nelson has a great history and story to tell through the legacy of Thomas Cawthron. There's nothing in particular that I think we need to be aware of as a council, other than both the launch of the foundation. The foundation is chaired by Dr. Morgan Williams, the former Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, who lives in our region. It's great to have Pam, his wife, on the trust board, and to have Morgan heading up the foundation. The Cawthron Institute itself continues to thrive and develop. We've seen some major advances in algae science and selective breeding occurring over the last 12 months, and my feeling is that both the board and the trust are in very good heart and continuing to deliver to the city. The role is one that is, the appointment is made by Parliament through the legislation that establishes the trust, so it will be an ongoing role for whoever sits in the role of Mayor of the city. Happy to take any questions. Councillor Ward.
Where can I see the display or background display of the Thomas Cawthron legacy? Somewhere around the city, just not upstairs, so it's quite impressive.
Was it at the museum? I don't think that's opened. No, I think we've got Women of Empire coming to the museum. I should know, and I don't know. My apologies. Yes, yes. Thank you. All right, no further questions. In that case, we'll move on to the Elko Boswick Civic Awards. Now, I just need Mr. Ward to help me out here, because I think we are, and Mr. Shattuck, we are working with a partner on this, I believe. Yes, we are. The Nelson Mail? Yes, we're confirmed to do that, and it's moving forward for next year. Perfect. So those of you who are on that little list, we will be talking to you soon about the process that we're going to work through for recognising wonderful people in our community. But I would encourage you all, if there are people, I quite like acknowledging people's contribution, and I'm always, at any time of the year, very happy to acknowledge people who are making a contribution to the city, and we have mechanisms for doing that outside of the Civic Awards and outside of the Mayor's Bouquet. So at any time, if there's somebody that you think should be acknowledged, please let me know, and we can make sure that we do that. Nelson Tasman Business Trust, Councillor Copeland.
Thanks very much. I didn't come prepared with a report this morning. I wasn't sure how the format of the morning was going to proceed, so my apologies. Just not a lot to report. I mean, the Nelson Tasman Business Trust has been running for many years now, but I guess the most relevant change is that they had to re-tender again for the mentoring role here in Nelson, having the government change their decision to incorporate that into the Economic Development Agency, or under that umbrella. So the trust had to basically resubmit for that position of offering the mentoring service, which of course they were successful in obtaining that contract, and they're looking forward very much to the new iteration of the EDA, and working in a somewhat different structure in the administrative sense, but as far as the service goes, that's going from strength to strength and continues to fill a need here in Nelson and really assist many, particularly startup businesses, to find their feet, especially in those formative first couple of years. And the business lunch events continue to be popular as well, and they have some quite contemporary and interesting speakers and how-tos, working in the areas of IP and a lot of technological stuff as well. So yeah, it goes on and is a fantastic organisation, supplying supplying a market, fulfilling a great need here in Nelson. And Madam Mayor, maybe you know better than I how long it's been going for. Is it like it's a 15-year, 20-year?
I think it is. Councillor Copeland, I think it is about 15.
I think it's more
certainly
than 15.
predates my involvement.
I was going to say
with
20
council.
years, so you
Yeah.
know, it is a continuous and a continuing service in the community here, and it just it continues to be a strong contributor in the business sector.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Copeland? No questions. I would. This is a little bit of a segue, but I did think it was fantastic to see, talking about innovative businesses, to see Switch Lighting acknowledged for being one of the highest growth businesses in New Zealand. It's a fantastic Nelson-based business. Now, Councillor. We're back to the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor. The Mayor and the Deputy have had no reason to meet in terms of the Nelson Tasman Mayoral Relief Fund. There has been, which is a very positive thing because we haven't had an emergency that's required us meeting, so that's a good thing. Safer Community Council, Councillor McGurk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Probably just a brief update. The Nelson Safer Community Council is probably one of the last, if not the last, remaining Safer Community Council left in the country. Ever since the Ministry of the Justice withdrew their funding, they've gradually gone by the wayside. To that, the council does provide, I think, $5,000 per annum, which pays for a administrator and secretary, and also one of the accountants downstairs in the finance department performs the treasurer function. So that's about the limit of the council's financial contribution. And I'd very much like that to continue. I suppose my interest and role goes back to a former life, and it's one I'm certainly happy to continue with on council. In terms of projects doing in the council, they were the forerunner of the Alcohol Accord. They're recently running a program on youth access to alcohol, and are about to launch a number of community programs on cyber safety, particularly with the aged community groups and school-aged school programs as part of the youth education along with the police. One of the drawbacks I'd have to say is that the involvement of other government departments and government functions has probably diminished over the years, and have gradually dropped away to almost, I think there's almost next to none formal representation from other government, central government departments, particularly the police and Department of Social Welfare, two in particular. So that's really about all that there is to say about that. The AGM for the Safer Community Council will be on the 2nd of December at ACC.
Thank you, Councillor McGurk. Question from Councillor Ackland.
My question is, Councillor McGurk, and it's more a reflection about me, but I don't exactly know what that group does. Can you just tell me?
The role identify opportunities to increase the sense of community safety or community safety in the community. Bit of a cack-handed way of saying it. Will act as an incubator to get the thing up and running before passing on. And that was an example of the Alcohol Accord. That was brought the various protagonists in that debate together, and with the help of the Hospitality New Zealand, police, ACC, that take it on. Much the same with the alcohol, the youth one with alcohol. It's probably something that's going to be passed on to something like the Safeguarding Children's Initiative, and with the safety. So it doesn't see itself as a long-term guardian of these things. Identifies a need, brings people together, incubates it, and then passes it on.
It's a great summary. Thank you. Right, no further questions on the Safe Community Council. In that case, Councillor Skinner, Sport Tasman Trust.
Cheers, guys. I'm sure many of you are aware of what Sports Tasman do. I've enjoyed the involvement with Sports Tasman. There's a lot happening there. Their slogan's very apt, more people, more active, more often. It's made up of, the board's made up of councillors like myself from various areas around the top of the south, because Sports Tasman covers not just Nelson, but goes from Westport through to Kaikoura. So there's a bit of travelling involved with some of the meetings in the various areas, but what I appreciate with the group, they're very people orientated, and they make sure that the meetings are spread around and we're on the coalface of what's happening in that sense. Sports Tasman probably seems like it's centred around the Saxton area. When City Council myself come in as a representative, as is Richard Kempthorne from Tasman, of their involvement with Saxton area. And Sports Tasman are supported by Nelson City Council and much some of the funding, and were contracted to run the stadium, and it's probably been in the radar a bit with the Trafalgar Centre, and as you're all aware, a lot of the sports have been moved over to the Saxton Stadium, and the Saxton Stadium is orientated for community sports, so they've been very good in housing what was at Trafalgar. So we're coming to a very important part, I think, especially in my role and our role as council, is that changeover where we'll be moving some of the sports back to Trafalgar Centre and getting everything back to where it's in a happy medium there to make use of both those. Other areas of Sports Tasman may or not be aware of, they won the contract for the Masters Games, which was a huge success. They involved in a lot of community sports, with helping with funding of the activities like Kiwi Sport, the kids, etc. But also other clubs. So if I don't know, if a hockey club needs a bit of both monetary or advice help in starting up or running a program, that's where Sports Tasman's expertise, not just in a monetary term, but even in a governance or coaching sense of a word. But Sports Tasman's runs, also impressed, they run a very tight ship, and they're very much people orientated, and I'm impressed by the staff of Sports Tasman. They're very passionate in what they do, and they put a lot of time, effort, and even time outside their own hours. So they get the right people, and they tend to stay in the organisation for a good period of time. But Sports Tasman, obviously, as a trust, relies on funding, and it gets support from the likes of the Nelson Mail, the Lion Foundation, New Zealand Community Trust, the Rata Foundation, Sport New Zealand, More FM Pub Charity, obviously Tasman as well as Nelson City Councils, even the Bowie Motor Group, ASB Bank. So they have to fight hard, and that's been a learning curve for me. They have to fight hard for these funding, especially as Sports New Zealand goes through a bit of a culture change on how they allocate the funding, etc. So they've got to be ahead of the game in that sense. They've also got coming up to this month. We've got the Nelson Sports Awards coming up, and it does very well for that. They also have had the secondary school sports awards, Tasman Sports Awards have been through. So there's always a lot happening, much more than I'm aware of in my involvement. But I've found it very good personally for my own growth, being involved in that, but also see a great importance for us to make sure that we've got a finger, or not a finger, but an involvement, a share in that, working alongside Tasman, and it's been good working alongside the other councillors from the other regions. But there's a lot to cover, and more than I can give in 5 minutes. But more like, if people got questions, it's probably easier for me to answer any questions. And feel free. There's a bit of an agenda here of what we've covered. I might give you a bit of an overview of what we do, but open to many questions.
Thank you, councillors. Question from Councillor Eklund.
Thanks, Councillor Skinner. I'm going to ask a detailed question, so if you don't know, just let me know, that's fine. But it sounds quite good and quite collegial among the different councils. We fund, we offer some funding towards it. Did the other councils also do that in kind? And is it how do you know off the top of your head whether is that proportionate, or how that's sort of done? Or?
We've got Tasman City Council, Nelson City Council, pretty much 50-50 as far as the Saxton area. But the other city councils, we've got Westport, Kaikoura. Their involvement is as far as Sports Tasman, which was just outside of what we do, but as far as they contracted to get people more involved, both community, elderly, young, involved in sports for the health reasons, not just the high achievers as such. They obviously look out for that as well. So those other councils, because they have a stake in what happens in the areas and they've really got the finger on the pulse there, that's where their involvement comes in, the personal. I don't know if monetary funding, no, I'd be wrong to answer where that comes in.
Any further questions? No further questions. It's obviously a very important organisation throughout the region, and the importance of the close association, I think, is right to be highlighted. So thank you, Councillor Skinner.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Barker, I missed you. Sorry.
Yeah, a late question. How did the South Island Masters Games work out financially, do you know?
Very, very well. So it was good for it was obviously very good for the region, the Masters Games. It brought a lot of people up here, and we've had it here several times in a row now in Nelson. So facilities have been brilliant for it, and I think that's why we got the contract, or Sports Tasman I should say, got the contract for that. So financially, no, they came out well on that. So they got bookings, etc. It's obviously relying on the bookings. You get to a point, the amount of bookings, and as they go, and you get to a point with a break even, and we went over that break even. But as you know, Nelson people can be a bit slow to book or buy tickets. They're always very keen and very much involved in these things, but they tend to leave their purchase of tickets at the last moment. So, but it was pushed very hard by the network in Nelson, and yes, they got the bookings and had a great turnout, better than they expected. Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions. Councillor Davey has already presented on behalf of Te Hunanui Beach Holiday Park. Next up is Talking Heads, Mayor and the Deputy Mayor. Talking Heads has been going through a bit of a transition over the last couple of years with a decision for the chief executives to take more of a role to connect organisations. That I'm just checked up with the chief executive, and she tells me it's in abeyance at the moment. So will that be a fair description?
Yes, it would, Madam Mayor, in relation to Talking Heads. There is quite a bit of work being undertaken in the space of regional intersectoral forum, which is the local heads of central government agencies and other stakeholders getting together, and that has been showing reinvigoration in recent times.
I think we're seeing a sort of a morphing into a different forum that will be formalised over the next 12 months or so. Now, Top of the South Scenic and Heritage Trails Trust. There's been no activity. And actually, I'd have to say this is one where I'm going to put my hand up and go, and if you ask me what I'm supposed to be doing, I've got no idea on this one. There we go. Mr. Ward, can you help me out? Yes, sorry, I've put you on the spot there. Top of the South Scenic Heritage Trails Trust. I don't think I've seen it doing anything. Is it in your space? Has it come across your desk at all? No. No? Chief Executive? No. I think Councillor Ward knows. Councillor Ward, help me out.
I know the Heritage Trail was set up probably in the late 90s, and Derek Shaw was the councillor who pushed really hard. And I see the signage around the region as I travel around. So the trail exists. I imagine that's where the work probably finished. I don't know what else happens now, but I know it was Derek Shaw was the one who pushed for it.
What I might do is I might follow up with Nelson Tasman Tourism, and just because I think that's probably where the linkage is, and we'll find out how it's going. All right, a question from Councillor Noonan. Good morning.
And I apologise, I have had several communication breakdowns this morning. If it's a trust, who are the trustees?
I'd have to get out the trust document and find out. I suspect it is. I think it's a Nelson Tasman Marlborough initiative. So I think you'll find that the mayors or their representatives from the three councils will be on there, plus some independents. That's my recollection. Plus Department of Conservation. I do remember it coming to council many years ago when Councillor Shaw was involved.
Okay, sounds like it's one of those ones that got up and running and is really successful and it's just carrying on.
Well, I always like those.
So do I.
They're great. Right, Trust Power Community Awards. Councillor Barker, would you like to present on this one?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, over the last 2 years, the Trustbound Community Awards have been taking place as they have done for years in the past. Last year, the local winner was Project Butterfly, and that was very well received at the national awards event. Unfortunately, it didn't win, but it was very well received, and what they're doing in Fairfield Park is still taking place and proceeding. So it's a very dedicated little bunch of people. But over the period of this year, the community awards have again taken place with entries, and the winner this year, can I announce it yet? I think I can. It was Light Nelson. Light Nelson is the winner, and they will be presenting their presentation at the National Awards in Dunedin early next year sometime, and I'm presuming the Mayor will be attending. It's going very well. The Trustpower business seems to be very profitable and has continued to support local community not-for-profit organisations for some years now, and it's continuing to do so, so it's really good to be involved.
Right, thank you, Councillor Barker, and thank you for the work that you do with the judging. I know that's quite a lot of work involved in that, and I have to say it was great to see Light Nelson be successful in the Supreme Award, and I think they'll compete extremely well in the national competition.
I'm hoping that they'll be able to do a very good overhead with lots of lights presentation at the function.
Great, thank you. Any questions? No questions. That's pretty straightforward, that one. Now the Marae Whakatū Marae committee. I sit on the Marae committee with representatives of iwi from Te Taihu. We meet monthly. We provide governance for the marae and the marae management. It is obviously a very important, and I'll call it community facility in Nelson, because that is the ethos of our marae. We have had quite a busy year. We undertook or commenced some land transfer changes during the year in relation to the land ownership of the Kamatua flats. There are a range of underlying legal status for the land held by the marae, and we have been moving the land across into Māori land so that it has the protections that it needs around that, rather than being in freehold status. And that has been quite a somewhat complicated legal process, but I think it's well underway and has been supported by all of iwi. The committee, I would say in terms of my role, it is a very much a governance role. So it is a hands-on governance role. We are reviewing the financials every month. We're looking at health and safety matters. We're looking at employment matters. It is certainly not a role that you can take on by halves. And I'm happy to take any questions. No questions? Right, thank you. Now, Youth and Community Facilities Trust, Councillor Ackland.
Madam Mayor, thank you. I've got quite a bit to say on this one, so I just wonder whether we ought to have a quick break and cup of tea before I...
That's a thank you. If you do, we will do that. Thank you for the advice. So we'll take, let's take 10, 15 minutes and come back. All right, we'll get underway. Right, Councillor Eklund, we're up to the Youth and Community Facilities Trust.
Thank you, Madam
Over to
Mayor.
you.
I ran the risk slightly of perhaps over-egging the expectation.
They're pretty high.
It's not. My report won't be that exciting, sorry. So I don't have a slide presentation, for instance. Although, if you get bored, feel free to look through the Tahuna Nui photographs. They're very good. So the Youth and Community Facilities Trust has been around, I think, since around about 2000, 2001. It was established with various organisations in Nelson to address a gap in youth need or demand. And Gail Collingwood was a proponent of that, and she was a founding trustee of that trust. And Council's been a provider and committed supporter of the trust since then. So this is the organisation that used to work out of the Hub building, and there are 4 main branches of activity that the trust undertakes. There's the truck, which you might have seen, Nelson Underage, Cactus, and Youth Transition Services. So the truck is the recreation service, so they go out into the community and have different sporting equipment and so on, and engaging with the youth in different areas around Nelson throughout the week, and it's a pretty great part of some young people's day with mobile skate parks and sporting equipment and video games and things, and it seems pretty popular. That is funded by Council, the recreational arm of the organisation. Nelson Underage, you might remember as well, because Dave Artoa and the then events manager came and presented to Council in the long-term plan and other times with video clips and so on of some of those youth events. And there were some pretty amazing concerts and things that were happening at that time. So they are no longer funded by Council for that aspect of their of the trust, and they're pitching for that work going forward. And they rely on support from other agencies as well. The Cactus program, you might also know, I know the Mayor does, because I've seen a photograph of her at an awards presentation or graduation. That's the one where groups of young people run around Nelson at 6 AM in a boot camp type military exercise, and it looks pretty amazing. Actually, probably, Madam Mayor, you probably talk about it better than I can, having direct involvement in the program itself. I don't know whether you haven't actually participated in the program.
I haven't done a run up the church steps at 6 AM in the morning, Councillor. No. The day I can do that, I'll be really excited.
And they run around Nelson with sort of logs of wood on their shoulders and things. It's pretty cool and pretty motivating, and that's supported by other agencies in Nelson as well. So there's police and ports and other agencies involved with that. And then the Youth Transition Service is really based around disengaged, I guess I could call it, youth primarily. So that's people who need assistance with actually just getting some motivation and also getting some skills together for employment and future education opportunities, help with CVs, help with finding accommodation and stuff. And there's also crisis management in there as well, where emergency housing needs and stuff for young people. So the whole of the organisation's aimed at that age group of young people, essentially 11 to 18, and really only 11-year-olds because of that recreational aspect of the truck. So the trust's been going along happily-ish. The loss of the hub building has been significant for them, and that's had a result of expenditure that they haven't had in the past, and various other things. I think often with these, and my perception is with community-based organisations like this, as we all know, there's always a need for, and there's always a demand on them financially, and the trust is doing really well. And what will happen though in the near future is that Council will have to be making some decisions on, in sort of a policy type way, on which direction we wish to go in terms of supporting youth services in Nelson and around particularly this trust as well. And I think that's going to be coming soon in December, so we'll be asked, I think Chris is going to be preparing a report which might come through, and that will be having to look, and I think making some pretty solid decisions about which direction we wish to go as a council. And just as a little note as well, just as on a personal aspect, it is a, and it's sort of a note that I'll raise with the Chief Executive as well. It is a slightly awkward position, I find, being a trustee on some of these organisations, because you do get in. My sense is that I inevitably take on an advocacy role because I feel very strongly, having worked with this group for 2 years now, very closely aligned with its mission and so on. So I take that on, and just as a note is that it is tricky then to be able to sit at the council table perhaps and make wider policy decisions once you carry that sense of obligation. Essentially, that's just encapsulating what bias is, I guess. But and also, just as we note, Pete Rainey is also on the trust. He sits in his personal capacity and as a trustee on the trust. And it's a great organisation, and really committed people are involved.
Thank you. That's great. Look, the Cactus, I'd have to say the Cactus program is one that I think is fantastic for young people in Nelson. It brings together some of our students who are leaders within schools with some other young people that really enjoy the motivation and the support. And I want to acknowledge the Nelson Police who just put in so much work into that program, and it's really special. Councillor Noonan's been up to do the award ceremony as well. I think we might both feel a bit of an affinity to the Cactus program because in a former life we had slightly naughty teenage boys. So, questions for Councillor Eklund. Councillor Skinner.
Cheers. Councillor Eklund, no, I'm very heartened by what you're talking about there. Victory Boxing, is there any interaction with Victory Boxing and the advocacy and the help of people with maybe in more challenged circumstances?
I don't know the answer to that, but it is actually that's a terrific point. So there's actually a meeting tonight, Councillor Skinner. So I'll raise that. I think that's exactly right. That looking at different opportunities for organisations to support youth, and that's a really terrific one. I should have said, just to segue into other news, is that the trust also is engaging more widely with other organisations in Nelson, and they've just this year built a strong relationship with NMIT, and that looks pretty exciting because that's also transitioning young people at that time in their lives as well back into study if need be, and providing support services around. So sorry, to link it back to your question, is that's right. I think other organisations are a big part of the trust's functioning, and Victory Boxing, I think that's a good idea. Yeah,
maybe a sort of we're in touch with Paul Hampton, maybe a sort of exchange of
Thank you.
services.
Councillor Noonan.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm interested in the transition part too. And I just wondered if on the trust, this is a shocking place to sit. I'm just wondering if on the trust there are any teachers, any schools represented?
Indirectly, through Marie, she's works directly with schools through the next one, actually, the Youth Nelson, which is for. Now I can't remember the word, the old word for expelled, the new word for expelled, I think it's called excluded, for excluded kids. So I can deal with that next, but she worked closely in a schools type environment, and she teaches at that school. So yes, I guess is the answer to your question.
So Madam Mayor, it's just a suggestion, but I've seen in other places where people give their work clothes as in for interviews and things, and I just wondered whether that was something that was done or represented, but I'd be interested to talk to you outside the meeting to see whether that is something that is done to lend clothes to people to go for interviews for business things, because they obviously won't have those sorts of things. So.
Maybe follow that up outside the meeting. Any further questions for Councillor Eklund? No? All right, thank you for your report back. And the issue of the roles that we all hold, the Chief Executive and I have been going through, or the officers and the Chief Executive have just been going through a review of the trust deeds, the history to how organisations were established and why we have roles. It's been a really interesting process to find out what we don't know, I have to say, and what documents we are missing, and actually link back to the history, what sits in the trust deeds, and the relationship. So we're going to have a go at getting that report up for December, but there is a lot of work to bring it forward in a way that where we can make robust decisions. So it might come up to the two-stage process of a bit of a discussion around some principles of what we're involved in and what we're not moving forward, and then some finalisation next year, but work in progress. Questions on that comment?
Just on that comment, Madam Mayor, I have some sympathy for Councillor Eklund. And while there might be a place for a liaison person when we review these, rather than just say we're not doing anything more with this organisation, there may be a role for a liaison or a contact person, so they're not sort of cut off completely.
When we work that up, we'll bring back some options and we can look at some principles around that. Councillor Barker?
Yes, seeing as you've raised that issue of the history of the organisations we're involved with, the Schedule 4 that we're looking at here is classified as COs are organisations in which one or more local authorities control any proportion of the voting rights or rights to appoint a director trustee. Nowhere on our list, on this list or the other list, is the Five Shower Foundation. Now, the Five Shower Foundation operates largely through the benefit of the funds that council forgoes from having its property used for the Nelson market. The funds go direct to the Five Shower Foundation, as I understand it. And I'm surprised that we don't have a representative on the Five Shower Foundation, considering that it is council funds virtually that are being used.
Well, we've done some archival work on that, and that's not quite correct. So when we come back, we've now got something called the Central Relief Fund, and the Central Relief Fund has given some money to the Five Shire Foundation this year. But when we come back to review the organisations, we'll talk through the history of that particular one and its relationship to Five Shire. Now, next up, we've got Community and Whānau group. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, I've missed one. Oh, sorry, Youth Nelson, Councillor Eklund.
Just picking up on the bias point quickly. The point I was making, actually, I mean, I believe in that trust, is what it's doing. But my concern was more about it's a question mark about does that then affect my ability to be independent when I come to council decision making. So it's not that I feel awkward at that group so much. It's more the reverse, in fact. Anyway, so Youth Nelson. Now, I admit I'm not as engaged in this group as the other, and essentially that's because it's autonomous and runs very well, in my view, and council has a smaller involvement in terms of financial contribution. What this is the excluded kids. So kids are excluded from high schools in Nelson. Basically, it's supported by the Ministry of Education and also supported by council by way of providing vans and so on, use of vans and facilities, not so much direct financial as I understand it. And look, it's pretty fantastic actually. I do some work in youth justice through the youth court, and this is kind of the educational side of the same coin in a way. I think that the teachers there do a really amazing job, and they're pretty committed to their work. It's very difficult at times, and it's actually, from the times I've been there, it's a very enjoyable school environment.
Questions? No questions? Youth Nelson's been around for quite a while now, hasn't it? I'm thinking it might be getting up to 15, 20 years. Yeah. Councillor Barker?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's a funny sort of situation with a gifting or a bequest of the land or something. Chris, do you know?
Mr. Ward, do you want to help us out with this?
So my understanding is there's a community lease in place for Youth Nelson, maybe on the Pioneer Park location. Yeah.
Great. All right, now, Community and Whānau.
Community and Whānau is the most amazing group, and I don't want anybody else to take it on. It's a group of a wide range of other groups, and they come together monthly. The next meeting's on the 9th of December, so anyone is welcome to go at any point in time. And in fact, I'm sure that the Community and Whānau group would be happy if I extended an invitation to other groups to represent themselves at the meeting. They usually have a speaker, so they take from the pool of people that go to the meetings, they take turns in speaking about what they do. I think that they decided during the year they wondered what each other did, and so they decided that they would take turns and present on what they each did. And then they have a time where they can mix and mingle over lunch. It takes a couple of hours. It starts at 12 and it finishes at 1:30. otherwise, no, it's just a really good forum for information gathering and swapping and yeah, mixing.
Any questions? Right, it's a monthly
monthly
meeting.
meeting.
And where do you normally meet?
We meet in the pavilion, thanks to the City Council's
Right, at
generosity.
Trafalgar Park Pavilion.
Yes.
Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair, that group expressed some grave concerns about how we fund community works, community services, community groups, basically. We've changed that. What's been the reaction?
Mr. Ward's smiling from ear to ear because I think he was the most popular person at the last meeting. They're really happy with the way that it's working, and they think it's a huge, a huge step from what we were doing. They're very happy. What I was going to say also is that there is an opportunity for Pete, Rainey and I are both on that, for us to update them as to what we're doing here. So each month we get a little spot of what's happening at council. So that's our opportunity to feed into them. But you know, they're really happy with the way that it's changed.
Great, thank you. Any further questions? No? Okay, that's great. All right, moving on to the Nelson Youth Council. Councillor Laurie, would you like to present?
For those of you who don't know, the council representatives on the Youth Council are Councillor Pete Rainey and myself. The Youth Council's been going since 1988, and it's got up to 20 people aged from 14 to 24. They're a very active bunch. The role of the Youth Council is to bring the perspective and opinions of young people to council, to discuss and promote solutions to issues that affect young people, to write and present submissions on issues that affect young people, to learn about how council works, to get involved in events, conferences and projects, and to attend regular monthly meetings. And this year they've done all of those things and then some. The 2015 Youth Councillors have represented Nelson College for Girls, Nayland College, Garran College, Waimea College. There is a Rangatahi Māori advocate, and there was a representative from NMIT, but unfortunately her political career went upwards and she's now the Vice President of Sanity, the NMIT Student Association. So hopefully there'll be an NMIT representative on the 2016 Youth Council, because obviously it's a huge part of our youth world in Nelson. The meetings are packed. There's awesome attendance. The councillors all engage. They ask a lot of questions. They know more about what's happening in our city, I think, than most people, possibly including some of us. They are involved in everything. They've been involved this year in everything from the Mask Parade to street art in Stoke. They've been involved in Heritage Week. They made, in my opinion, an excellent submission to the draft Brook Plan. They also made another submission to the draft Urban Environments Plan. They love making submissions. They love discussing things, and they're not afraid to take a different position from council, which I think is a very valuable thing for democracy in Nelson. They've also discussed bigger events, bigger things like the TPPA. They've debated sugary drinks. They have opinions on lots of things, and they're interested. One of the youth councillors, Keegan Phipps, has been named Nelson's Youth MP, and he's off to Wellington. In my opinion, they are quite an inspiring bunch of young people. Meeting with them makes both Councillor Rainey and myself and I feel younger. In fact, Councillor Rainey feels so young he's on a motorbike hooning around the South Island right now as I speak. The next event for the Youth Council is its induction for new members on December 9th. They have absolutely no problem in attracting applications to the Youth Council. It's massively oversubscribed. It's also worth pointing out that not all towns and cities have youth councils, and in many ways Nelson's Youth Council is seen as something of a role model for other local authorities and for what's possible. So I would just like to say that Rachel Large, the council officer who runs the Youth Council, does a fantastic job. She's very involved, very committed. She's a hands-on coordinator. She's helping the youth councillors and working with youth councillors just about every day, from what I can tell. And Pete and I also find, I think I can say this on behalf of both of us, I think we find it a very interesting event, attending the youth councils, but also we get a lot of feedback from them about how much they appreciate us being there. Sometimes we can give context to discussions about things that started a long time ago, like the flag debate, for example, or all sorts of things. So we like being there, and they seem to like having us there, and I know they also really appreciate having at least 2 familiar faces when they come here to sit on committees and sit on council. So yeah, big ups to the Youth Council. I think it's a good thing that we do here in Nelson.
Thank you. Councillor Eklund, Councillor Noonan.
Councillor Laurie, are you and Councillor Rainey polluting young people's minds with your own views and opinions at that?
Never, absolutely not. No, we're balanced in all our discussions. Yeah, we take the role very seriously. Yeah, I didn't wear that T-shirt in case you're wondering. But I'm really impressed by them, and I just wish it had been around when I was a kid.
Yeah, my experience with the youth councillors, they are very good independent thinkers, Councillor Eklund. So I think they're safe from being polluted. Councillor Noonan.
Just make a comment before I ask my question. I happened to be walking past the chamber door one day, and they were meeting, and I thought, oh, I'll pop in and sit up in the gallery, and it was. There are a lot of them, aren't there? Yeah. And whoever was doing the chair that day was scary. She was really good. I'd be surprised if these guys got a look in, actually. But they were also very polite and respectful of one another. And I was sitting there thinking, they really do this beautifully. So they were totally onto it. So my question is, how are they getting on sorting out next year's youth council? Have they selected them?
Oh yeah, no, sorted. Yeah, so the induction for the new councillors is on the 9th of December.
Oh, okay.
Yep, all sorted. Yeah, they aren't afraid to tell Pete and I off if they think we're talking too much or, getting off the topic. They're really good.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your contribution to the youth council as a really important part of our local democracy. So I certainly really appreciate the youth councillors that come out and about with me from time to time. We do different events around the city, and I had a really excellent session with the youth employment subgroup last week, talking through their thoughts on youth employment in the city, and I hope that, obviously that's a decision for next year's youth councillors whether they continue with that subgroup or not, but I'm hopeful they will, because their thinking is extremely good in that space, and I thought we could really make a difference in Nelson with the leadership of the Youth Council. Next up, we have, I've turned my page. I was thinking we were nearly at the end, and then I turned my page and went, oh no, we've got a whole another 2 pages to go. So we are finished on that sheet, and then we're across the other side. Marina Users Group. Councillor Barker.
Yes, well, Councillor Rainey and I had a discussion about this last week, and as we reported at the last occasion, as some others have indicated, this is one area where it's a little bit awkward from time to time, so neither of us have been participating directly in the meetings that they have, but we are both on email link trees, so we're aware of what's happening, and they know that they can come to us when they need to. But because there's been so much interaction between council and the users group, we've both felt it's a little awkward at being at some of the meetings, and would rather not take part than be involved in what could be a adversary type situation.
Okay, so that's just in terms of, we've been doing a marina review, and I think we've got feedback from the marina users group, I understand. Yes, I think we have. So that's coming through. So this is just making sure that you keep the separation between your decision-making roles and what is potentially an advocacy group.
Exactly.
Okay. Any questions for Councillor Barker? No? Okay, and then we'll move on to Sustainability Forum. Councillor Ward, would you mind presenting on that one?
Meetings are around probably 2 monthly if we're lucky, but I value the opportunity to actually talk to these folk, and as your sustainability champion, it's actually good to have a group of people like this to talk to. And we do get feedback from the organisations on what they're doing on their sustainability initiatives. Lindsay Wood attempted to get the Mail to run a series of articles. I'm hoping this may still come to bear bear fruit at some stage, but on sustainability champions in the city, on people who are actually doing stuff, just the ordinary stuff, not the big stuff, but the people who are walking their kids to school each day, the people who are thoughtful about where they get their food from, just those ordinary, the folk maybe who have moved into town to live and sort of reduce the pressure on our roads out here. They're just those ordinary things that people don't normally think of as being environmental initiatives, but they're the kind of things that ordinary people do all the time. I was prepared to do the illustrations for that. He was prepared to do the stories. I'm hopeful that will still happen, because I think that would be a good initiative for a group like this, just saying, well, keep your ears open. If the good things are happening, one of the good ways of making them continue to happen is simply by telling the stories, applauding the initiatives when they do happen. So not as active as it has been in the past, but I still think it's worth keep going.
Thank you. Anyone else who's on the forum want to add anything? Well, that pretty much covers it. Councillor Lloyd?
I just say I agree with Councillor Ward, and what I find very interesting is the depth of knowledge of the people who are on that forum about all things related to sustainability, and sometimes I just appreciate having the opportunity to sit in a room and listen to people who know what they're talking about, discuss the issues confronting the region, and I feel like they are a resource that we could take greater advantage of, that we possibly should take greater advantage of, but I'm not sure how. Perhaps Councillor Ward has some thoughts on that?
Councillor Ward?
Well, I think actually having staff there is useful. Having just somebody come along to the meetings, it would be, it's in a couple of hours every month or two, but I think having staff there is useful. And we do have staff with a particular interest in this. We've now got Chelsea on board, and Christine is there for our programs as well. So I think just having them there would be useful.
There's certainly, as we go through this review process, that's something that I'm keeping in mind in terms of building community partnerships and the community partnership part of council. If I take the role of, as an example, where we've moved to with the Community Investment Fund and the feedback that we've had from Councillor Noonan this morning, that's incredibly well received. So I think there are opportunities to start building those partnerships in other areas, and the Sustainability Forum may be one of those. But hopefully the good news stories will get out there. I like good news stories. I think it's very good. I should say, sorry, I'll divert. I know we've got a long list to get through, but I have to say I really enjoyed going to the Hampton Street gala on Friday night, and enjoyed my sugar-free drink. Thank you, Councillor Eklund. And I was very impressed with the school garden, and I got a tip down there about how to stop the Weckers eating all of Richard's silverbeet. I'm going to say Richard's silverbeet because he really does look after the vegetable garden. So bit of recycling pipe across the top from the recycling centre, and some netting. If you want to know, if you've got problems with a Wecker in your garden. I'm not sure that's a problem. I think it's a success of our biodiversity. Right, moving on to biodiversity. There we go. Look at that, Nelson Biodiversity Forum. Who would like to present on Nelson Biodiversity? Councillor McGurk.
This is a fascinating and a really an enjoyable forum to be involved with. The council, I think there's three councillors, myself, Councillor Davey and Councillor Fulton are there, as well as staff in terms of Lynn Hall, the Environmental Programs Officer. And we also contract Peter Lawless as providing some technical advice. But the forums meet, and I think there is, at the last count, there were 26 different organisations actually front up, and we'll probably quite often have meetings in this forum of about 40 people representing those particular organisations. The agendas are full and diverse. We'd have to say that the work that the Biodiversity Forum has brought to us and has formed the basis of Nelson Nature. The programs and the various projects and initiatives that were identified in Nelson Nature came directly from the forum and the work that they've done in various aspects and tying together. And the council has probably had a huge accolades from the forum for that particular initiative. I was going to have some notes here. that's really all there is to say, is that in terms of council input, in terms of looking forward, is that we do have the planning staff coming down and they use the resources within the forum to inform work around particularly the Nelson plan, but more so input into things like the NES for plantation forestry, the NES review for freshwater, and also the development of the freshwater management unit standards. So that's all. It's a huge resource that council can use and do use in terms of perhaps our responsibilities under the biodiversity responsibilities for our regional council, and also our regional council responsibilities regarding land use, water, and probably a notable gap is probably the coastal and marine environment, something that's not really addressed in that forum particularly adequately well. But anyway, certainly for the terrestrial environment and fresh water, certainly is.
Questions, Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the Chair. Do you think, I was just thinking about the Sustainability Forum and the Biodiversity Forum, and I'm just wondering, is there any merit in looking at bringing the two together?
Nothing really springs to mind. I suppose biodiversity is more to do with the, I suppose, the flora and fauna of the city, and sustainability is probably more to do with the way that you're living. There certainly is some overlaps, like a sustainable lifestyle that does take cognizance of a environment that has biodiversity, and so there certainly are some overlaps.
Right, thank you. Any other questions for Councillor McGurk? No? Okay, so, Councillor Skinner?
Just a quick comment. Parramatta Flats, involvement in that?
Our Parramatta Flats, that's Forest and Bird,
okay.
And Ian Price does work out there, so Forest and Bird are certainly represented. They're probably one of the leading advocates for not only Parramatta Flats, but also the corridors, the halo effect in terms of that. It's probably worth noting is that the most, through the forum we've identified the Alpha Mark landscape up on the back hills is probably one of a unique environment. Not only is it unique in New Zealand, it's probably unique in the world. And what has come out of that is that we know what we don't know, and it's a lot that we don't know. There was a presentation from an entomologist employed by DOC, is that you're turning in terms of invertebrates. There you've probably got a biodiversity hotspot in terms of the concentration of different types of invertebrate. That is probably one of the most concentrated places for.
Where's that, sorry? Alpha Mark, just call it?
Basically the mineral belt.
Oh, mineral belt, yep.
In terms of what we know up there is that the number of invertebrates up there is probably the most diverse of anywhere on the planet. And we don't know what it's about that, so we've got huge gaps in our knowledge and understanding of what's going up there.
And the Nelson Biodiversity Forum, do they cover areas like the Brook Sanctuary, that area, the catchment area, I should say?
The Brook Sanctuary are partners of the Biodiversity Forum and participate as well.
Cool, and I enjoyed the article on the Inner Glen. Is that part of the Inner Glen, bit of that forest, the Inner Glen, the bit of the original forest?
Sorry, what was that?
The bit of a biodiversity area, original forest area with an Inner Glen, is that correct? I saw something on the... Is that... am I getting my wires crossed?
You're looking over the back into the roading and...
do you want me to help out? Well, I just interrupt the game of tennis.
Okay,
that's right.
sorry.
So that will be the Kelly block.
Kelly block.
That'll be the Kelly block. Very fine piece of bush, and lots of people out there at the weekend. Over 200, Paul. Very good wood pigeons.
So I've been meaning to. I saw that article. Thought of Councillor McGurk, funnily enough. But I'll be going to check that out. Cool.
Special piece of bush, and supported by many of the school children have been planting up to the piece of indigenous vegetation. Right, so that's Biodiversity Forum. Questions like one from Councillor Ward, but Councillor McGurk, my sense is that it's going well, going strong.
Yeah, it's going from strength to strength, and
fantastic.
We would have to say that we're getting more and more people, organisations wishing to become part of the Biodiversity Forum. The most recent one, I think, is an approach from the Boathouse Trust, looking at the harbour work around the harbour, particularly hutches around penguins and things like that.
Fantastic.
And seabirds.
Fantastic. Councillor Ward.
Just interested in your comments about the mineral belt. My sense is nothing grows there. It's quite unusual from that point of view. So you say it's diverse. I would have thought it was unique, but are there lots of things there, or is it just the things that are there are quite different?
The things that are there are quite are unique, and there's quite a lot of them. And what we do know is what we don't know. The poor matter, it's a relatively pristine environment. Probably the biggest threat to the mineral belt is wilding pines and goats tramping through there. So there's work going underway to get rid of both those wilding pines and the pests. But while they're doing it, is actually doing a survey of the flora and fauna that does actually exist.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Yes, I'm just wondering what cooperation you're working with the other stakeholder in this area, the private organisations that do the trapping in our areas, and particularly up the Marsden Valley. Have you got good liaison with them?
Yeah,
and in Marsden Valley there used to be a lot of school involvement, and if you walk up there you'll still see the signs from the various schools in very bad states of repair. Is there still liaison there?
Yes, there is, and that's through what's his name? It's Forest and Bird, and there's also the Friends of Marsden Valley. That's the name of the group. And doing the traps. They're doing traps all through that Marsden Valley. What was the other question?
There used to be a lot of school involvement in that area when they were planting up, particularly planting some of the areas that had been
the Enviro Schools program that was Mary Coonhouse, now Chelsea's taken on that role.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the next item, that's the Nelson Tasman Connections Steering Group. The Connections Group is focused on youth employment initiatives and connecting our young people into education. The group meets every couple of months. It's really just touching base to see what's going on in our community through schools, the Economic Development Agency and councils and training organisations. We had an all-day workshop with the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs a few months ago, and 2 of the youth councillors attended that session, which was great. I would say that I actually think the Youth Council is, if I said where would I put my efforts at the moment in terms of doing something that's going to really make a difference in our region, I'm keen, as I said before, to keep working with that Youth Council subgroup if that gets formed next year, because I think they really have got the drive and the enthusiasm. And connecting and listening to young people about youth employment issues is, to me, far more meaningful than talking about youth unemployment. It's much more useful to talk with people who are in that space. So the connection still continues on, but it's just getting reframed a little bit more around getting those youth voices into the discussion. Happy to take questions. Councillor Ward.
It's engagement as much as employment. You know, I mean, it's important for most of us. Employment is how we engage with the community. It gives us a sense of purpose, and it's what we're judged by. If we don't have a job, we're judged as being less successful. But in fact, in terms of our place in the community, just simply being engaged with activities within the community is very, very important. And so, does it go beyond employment to connections in the broader sense?
The focus is, so through the Connections scheme, we do look at are there particular health issues within the community? Are there social agencies that there need to be connections to? Are there a bit of a sweep across? Do we have activities that are youth focused that are actually going to connect people in? And I would use as an example, actually just picking up on an email that I had from Councillor Skinner last week, thinking about what keeps people in our region and what's important to them and keeps young people here. is actually a very broad church, and it goes to, can they continue their sporting endeavours? So with the initiative around having a youth football, making sure that we're connected into the National Football League, while you may go, what's that got to do with keeping young people in the region? Actually it does, because it allows those young people with a talent in football to stay in our region rather than head down to Christchurch or up to Wellington. So there's no exclusivity around this particular initiative. And the Chief Executive also mentioned the Regional Intersector Forum that's been established, and there's now becoming quite a crossover between the two, Councillor Ward. Right, Councillor Barker.
Thank you for that report. I'm wondering, given that throughout the whole of New Zealand there is a shortage of tradespeople, and we are actually importing tradespeople from overseas because we are not producing them in New Zealand, does the Connections Group recognise that it is necessary for the schools to actually promote to young people that there is a future in being a tradesperson?
I think Nelson actually leads the way in New Zealand in terms of trades academies. So if I said what is the one thing that we're doing extremely well and is a big part of what we talk on, is the trades academy. And if you look from Motueka right through the city, look at the work that's going on with Nelson Melbourne Institute of Technology, with Nelson College, the focus is very much around those careers and trades, and they're extremely well supported. So I think we've last year won one of the Prime Minister's awards for employment initiatives in the Trades Academy space. It's good. Okay, moving on to positive ageing. Councillor Noonan.
Positive ageing. Positive ageing is similar to community and whānau, but for the older person. So it's a group, it can be anybody, it's not a fixed group, anyone is invited who deals with the older person or the elderly person. And again, it's an information sharing forum. They meet quarterly in the Richmond Library, and they have a speaker. Gail Collingwood was the chair, and now Charles Tyrrell is the new chair. We haven't had a meeting under him, but we're going to have one next week. It's a really positive, it is a positive, if it wasn't a positive forum, we'd have a problem, wouldn't we? Because actually it's supposed to be encouraging things that happen in the third sector. So a very good forum to go to, I find. Any questions?
Any questions? No questions? Right, thank you, Councillor Noonan. Moving on to sister cities, and I don't think I need to report on that today because former Councillor Gail Collingwood presents to the Governance Committee, so you get an update on a regular basis in relation to sister cities. Is that all right, Councillor Davey? We leave that one. Tasman Bay Heritage Trust Appointments Committee. Councillor Ward, I think you've just fulfilled quite a very important task over the last few months.
I think we've acted twice during this term, once very briefly at the last minute, and this last time was to appoint 3 trustees to the trust, and that was quite extensive, with quite a few conference calls between the TDC, with Richard Kempthorne, and I was representing this council, and we had Jane Defoe representing iwi, and we also had the new chair there, sort of in an advisory capacity, and a day of interviews. So it was quite a demanding process. But you know, it's an interesting insight to how many people are keen to serve the community. I think there were 27 applicants for these 3 positions. We interviewed 7 over the course of a day. So yeah, there are plenty of people out there prepared to step up.
Any questions? If there's any questions, thank you very much for fulfilling that role. It was a lot of work involved in it, and really delighted with the candidates that have been appointed. We're in good heart moving forward. So thank you. Now moving on to the Waimea Water Augmentation Committee. Deputy Mayor, I don't think you've met in the interim, have you? Because the issue's been with the Tasman District Council, right? Community Action, Youth and Drugs. Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. This role is a fairly minimal one. I think I go to a couple of meetings a year, and it's just basically a reference group. Rosie Duncan from the Health Action Trust tells us what they've been doing, and we say that's very good, and a bit of discussion, and we leave. So it's not a particularly onerous duty, but they are doing quite active work in terms of sort of more innovative ways to deal with drug and alcohol use by young people.
All right. Questions, Councillor Noonan?
I'm just wondering how often they meet.
About once a quarter.
Councillor Ackland?
You may not know, but any impact from the psychedelic substances legislation?
They are active in making submissions to council.
Oh, no,
Psychoactive.
not psychedelic, psychoactive. When I
knew
said it, I thought it sounded a bit cooler than that.
Easy mistake to make.
Yeah. It's not the shoot you're wearing. They have noticed that there is still the prevalence of that, but mainly through its sales from the internet. But
it's interesting feedback. All right, moving on to the Nelson Tasman Housing Forum. Councillor Ward.
Well, it hasn't met actually since during this term, but I'm hopeful that the Property Developers Advisory Group will fulfil some of the functions of this of the Housing Forum. And in the 2 meetings to date, I must say I've enjoyed those 2 meetings, and I think that it's interesting that these people are prepared to engage not just on the things that concern them about the council processes, and they are there, but also about our aspirations in terms of housing and the broader issues of development around the CBD and around the region generally. So I'm hopeful that this is a substitute for the forum. And of course, we do have the Nelson Tasman Housing Trust represented there. So there's a broad group of interests.
Thank you. Now, Waimea Inlet Forum. Councillor Copeland, do you want to report back on this one?
Rather not, thank you, Madam Mayor.
No? Anyone wish to? Councillor McGurk?
yeah.
Thank you.
Again, this is not one that's particularly onerous. Most of their activities are to do with the banded rail and seagrass. The banded rail, a particularly rare bird that likes estuarine environments, and seagrass planting, which is providing a habitat for this particular one. Most of their work, in fact, all of the activities they're doing are in the TDC. They do have a very, very close relationship with the TDC and the environmental programs out there. Our only reason that we're involved in it is that we look after that small part of the inlet around past Whakatū Drive, around to Monaco, and that's about it. So it's not a huge need for it, but it is useful to be involved in some of their communications.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Thank you. I'll just take the opportunity to correct something that was said earlier this morning in the presentation by Mark Hall on the camp. He talked about a rare snail. I think he was referring to a rare back beach beetle, and that's part of the Waimea Inlet, so there is a very rare beetle there. If you want to see a specimen, you can go to the Mayor's Cawthron. They've got them there. I had to do that to actually see one.
Right, thank you. Okay. The Waimea Inlet Forums evolved out of the development of the Waimea Inlet Strategy, and that was a document that was developed by both councils. I think it was actually a really important step forward in terms of having a strategic approach to what is internationally significant in terms of estuarine environments, but it's it'll be interesting to see how that work evolves, Councillor McGurk, as we start to look at sea level rise issues and other things. It's certainly something we need to be conscious of.
Yeah, it'd be fair to say that many of the participants in the Waimea Inlet Forum are also members of the Nelson Biodiversity Forum. So they'll come wearing, they might be members of the Inlet Forum, but they also, particularly Birds New Zealand, Forest and Bird, are active in both organisations. So.
All right, ko tahitanga hui. We have got a hui coming up. I'm just looking at my diary now on the 10th of this month, of December, sorry, 10th of December. I've got it starting at 11:30 in the morning. That sounds right, so just make sure that's in your diary. We have had some discussion around how we move forward with this hui as to whether it needs to be focused on whether it's going to be chief executives from iwi and operational managers, or whether it's going to be at a strategic governance level, or a combination of the two. And as yet we haven't settled on a proposition. The Mayors and Chairs Forum is working its way through with the iwi chairs. They have met, I think, a couple of weeks ago, but that needs to be iwi-led, and the desire is that it is Tita Ihu, so the three mayors of the top of the south plus the iwi chairs. So for the moment, anticipate that that hui is going ahead on the 10th, and you are all invited, and I do not know what's on the agenda yet. If there are particular items that you would like to have on the agenda, then I think they should be forwarded to Mr. Wood, who would be the approach to administration advisors, okay, or discuss with the chief executive. Councillor McGurk.
Just wondering if has the hui had any a view about the kaihatu role here at council?
The kaihotu role is a really important role and will be being filled. It's not going anywhere, and I think the chief executive is working her way through that process at the moment. So she's been working, seeking feedback from both iwi chairs and iwi chief executives. Councillor Ward.
I always go to the hui, but I can't say it's a terribly satisfying experience. There are bits of it I appreciate, but I would like it to be more than just a focus on issues that council's currently involved in, that involve hui, and a bit of a report back on one or two of the initiatives that Māori are involved in. You know, some aspirational stuff, some you know, talk around where the city's going, and our respective roles and how we might help one another out. That's the kind of discussion that I would like to see happening. And I think it would be sad if, in fact, the councillors didn't have an opportunity, even though I don't think it's as good as it could be. I'm glad it's there, because it's my one opportunity to have this sit down around the table with local iwi. And so, you know, if it goes in its present form, I may lose that, and that would be a regret for me.
And that is an issue that I have raised with the iwi chairs. So the reason it's still sitting there is because I have taken up your, listened to you at the last session and said, look, we do need the engagement. It's really valued by my councillors, and so I'd like to have the opportunity to continue. So we'll call it work in progress. What I would say is if you have the opportunity to go and visit any of the iwi offices, you're always extremely welcome. So all of the iwi are working through their strategic plans, and whenever I've had the discussions with either the chief executives or the chairs, they're really interested in having those discussions with members of the community. So don't be afraid to take the time to go and visit the iwi that are based in our city, because they really do enjoy that interaction. All right, I think that finishes the list. Are there any that we've missed? Hopefully not. That's everything. Shaylee, we've done them all. Okay, well that sort of concludes the meeting. Oh, hang on, I've got something else I need to do. What was that? Do I need to do? Oh, we've got to note, right, that the reports from council representatives on external organisations be noted. So I'm happy to move that. Seconded by Councillor Skinner. I will put that. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. And just before we finish, I know you've probably all seen this link, but I really like it. So Shelley's just gonna wind up the pedal power of our technology, and I'll close the meeting. But we'll see what we can see what we can do. Oh, I can leave it on. Can you see it on the screen? Oh, well, that's a shame, because I was really hoping we could send this particular, I know it's playing on national TV, but I know our audience would be wider on live streaming. So I was hoping we'd be able to get this playing, but never mind. I'll close the meeting, and then we'll see what we can get up on the big screen.